Hello, all. Good to have you here for the opening night of this new series on Mark 1. Very, very excited. Jesus, an urgent call for extraordinary times, and we are definitely living in extraordinary times. It just seems to get stranger and stranger and stranger. And yet here we are with one another as a community of faith, people drawn together to learn from each other, to draw strength from each other, to be with each other. And I'm so glad you're here. We have folks here from the LA area and San Diego area and Del Mar, and I can't remember what Teresa's area is called now. I've lost it. Um,
Alpine.
Alpine. There we go. And all the way from Fort Worth, Texas. Brad and Laura, good to see you here this evening. So
Hey.
you are fantastic, fantastic. Well, let's start. Let's get into it. Let's see what's happening. Some of you, a few of you, had the opportunity to be with us a few weeks ago when we did a 1-hour kind of intro to the whole of the Gospel of Mark. And I'm going to look at that again for a little while, not our whole time together, but we do have some folks who are new to our gathering. So let's catch up a little bit and get a sense of where I'm coming with the Gospel of Mark, because I think it helps, it'll help our conversation. And I do hope that as we go, we can have some conversation. I led a meeting on Tuesday evening at which a couple of people were there. And I tried to get conversation out of that crew, and they just wouldn't talk. It was the doggonest thing I've ever seen. The one person who would talk was the person who was there for the very first time. And she just leaped into it. Fantastic. I love her already. And I want to encourage you to get my attention if you have a question or a comment or some way that might help us in our conversation. I truly believe in the wisdom of the group, the wisdom of the community. And I want to be in a way, I want to be in a way to draw out that wisdom. And as we go, we will become more and more conversational, more and more drawing from the group that's here, your understanding, how you encounter the text. This first week is a little more didactic, but that doesn't mean you can't interrupt. So do it. The Gospel of Mark. The Gospel of Mark is the first gospel written. We know that primarily because John, we know, was written so late compared to the other Gospels. And it is clear that the writer of Matthew and the writer of Luke have a copy of the Gospel of Mark that they are using to structure their Gospels from. And it's amazing that this early gospel had so much power that it influenced Matthew and Luke in dramatic ways. Now, Matthew and Luke had different audiences that they were trying to speak to, so they have a bit different emphasis in the story of Jesus. The Gospel of Matthew is primarily written to a Jewish audience. The Gospel of Luke is written to a mixed audience, but an audience that includes Greeks, and it would seem to have included people who are very learned. At least the author uses phraseology that is kind of complex. But the Gospel of Mark, we think, is written between 64 and 70 of the Common Era. That's about 30 years after Jesus' death and resurrection. I like to think that it was written in or about 64 or 65. And the reason for that, if you know your history, in the summer of 64, and that sounds like a Beatles song or maybe the Beach Boys, I don't know, in the summer of 64, as much as 70% of the city of Rome was burnt, consumed by fire. It raged out of control for 7 days. Now, the people who survived the fire believed that Nero had started the fire, Nero the emperor. Nero wanted to deflect that blame, so he chose this obscure, secretive religious sect that was beginning to gain strength in the city. And so, in order to get that attention off himself and also kind of to take care of this new group, which he didn't quite understand. They seemed, rumors were that they ate flesh and drank blood, but to kind of get the emphasis off himself and to help with this new group, he blamed the Christians for the fire. And according to historians, particularly Tacitus, Nero arrested a few members of the sect, tortured them, and they then implicated others who were tortured, who implicated others. And it spread quickly that the Christians were to blame and they were being held accountable. Some were burnt, some were crucified, some were put into the Colosseum to be torn apart by dogs. It was absolutely a heroic, I can't get the right word out, horrific moment for this fledgling church in Rome. So this is the backdrop that I want you to kind of understand how the Gospel of Mark works. And it works well in this backdrop if you can grasp the idea that the Gospel of Mark is not a book. In its origin, it is much closer to a speech or even a sermon. This is a sermon preached to persecuted Christians in Rome who can't gather out in the open. They can't gather in their homes. The only place they can find where it is safe for them to gather is in the catacombs, in these long tunnels underneath Rome and outside of Rome, where they would cut niches into the sides of those passageways and bury their dead one upon the other. That's where they found safety in order to be about being followers of Jesus. So let me share with you a couple of slides. I think I've actually figured out my slide issue from a few weeks ago. Let's see. This should be fun. And share. Here we go. This is a typical passageway within the catacombs underneath Rome. You know, the beginnings of the catacombs are a little bit sketchy in terms of history. We know that they were in place, some were in place in the middle of the 1st century. And by the end of the 5th century, there were over 375 miles of these passageways, which would have had the bodies of beloved Christian family members placed in those niches that you see to either side. In addition to these passageways, there would also be small family chapels. And these chapels most likely where were the Christians gathered for their services during this time of persecution. It is in these places that we find the first Christian art. Here we have Jesus, the Good Shepherd. It's just absolutely fabulous, dating from the middle of the 1st century. Just fabulous. I'm an art history buff. I just get really excited about it, if you can't tell. So that's kind of the setting. That's where the people are gathering. That's where the Gospel of Mark is first preached to the people of God. Okay, now, when that it just kind of happened there, didn't it? Do you have any questions, thoughts, comments, sensibilities about what this means for the gospel that will be preached?
Hey, Dale, I got a question.
Sure.
I wondered this a couple of weeks ago. It's kind of a weird question, but didn't the Nero's men search the catacombs, or were they looking for these people, or were there already enough passages that they could hide? Or I don't understand why they felt so safe there, other than their family members being buried there.
Well, that is certainly part of it. They're also within the religion dominating in Rome at that time, to be with the dead was a real issue.
Okay.
And so to go down into the catacombs and walk among the dead, I don't know the terminology, but it would be the same as being cursed. So it was a pretty safe place for them to be. I don't know the history of searching the catacombs. I'm not aware of that, but I am aware of the reticence of the people of Rome to go down into what essentially was a city of the dead.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Any other thoughts? Yeah, Patrick is sharing that was a good question, Laura. Thank you for asking. Well, this does change how we read the Gospel of Mark. And my conclusions around this actually began with a one-man play that Shelley and I saw in the late 1990s, and I think Temple actually saw a video of this play. The play is called Afraid, which we will discover as we go along. That's the last word in the Gospel of Mark in its original writing. The women go away and say nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Now, that's such a disturbing ending that later editors would add a first ending, and somebody said that's not even good enough, so they added a second ending. But the original ending is that word afraid. And so the actor was Frank Runyon. He was best known as Steve on, is it The Days of Our Lives? No, As the World Turns.
As the World Turns.
As the World Turns. Yes,
oh my God, he was the cutest ever.
You know, the truth is, there was a summer way back when there was a oil crisis and boycott and all that. Oh no, it wasn't that. It was the kidnapping at the Olympic Village. And all that happened on TV for an entire summer was 24/7 coverage of this happening in the world. I watched, except for the soap operas. I got a lot of soap operas in. But anyway, so I knew Steve. I recognized him as well as Shelley recognizing him. And what we didn't know is that Steve also got a master's in religion, and he wrote his master's thesis. His thesis was this play, this one-man play depicting the preacher of the Gospel of Mark down within the catacombs, speaking to a people who were afraid. It really kind of changes the entire atmosphere of the gospel. I just want to read for you the first 3 verses. In the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, it is written in the prophet Isaiah. See, I send my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way. The voice of one crying out in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make his paths straight. Now that's how it feels when you read it as if this is a book. But what if we read it with the same kind of feeling and atmosphere that the first Christians would have heard it in the catacombs below Rome? Let me see if I can pull this off again. Share screen. And we're on this one. There we go. Fantastic. Let's try that again. But imagine that you are part of a small gathering of Jesus followers huddled together under the city of Rome, here in the dark, cold and dank, illuminated only by candles whose dancing flames cast ever-moving shadows on the walls and the ceiling, surrounded by the remains of your mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters and friends. There, as part of the Christians, you are gathered in fear, fear that one of those empty niches might soon be filled with your own bones. And the preacher stands forth and proclaims the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. For as it is written in the prophet Isaiah, see, I am sending my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way. The voice of one crying out in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make his paths straight. Imagine the whole gospel that way. A man reaching into the fear of the people and lifting them up with the spirit of good news. That's what gospel means. The word literally means good news, and Mark was good news for a people living in fear. Does that kind of make sense? Does that kind of set the setting for this? Okay. So 2 weeks ago, I laid out why I wanted to work on the Gospel of Mark at this particular moment in time in history, our history. And I gave 2 reasons for that, and I just want to briefly state them again so those who are new to our gathering can have a sense of it. The first reason I wanted to use the Gospel of Mark is because Jesus' message in Mark's gospel is filled with urgency. And it's captured in this unusual word, this Greek word, euthus, which means literally straight away. We might more likely say immediately, but it literally means straight away, right now, no waiting, here it is. And you may not catch that in your regular reading of the Gospel of Mark, because what we have in our Bibles is the Gospel of Mark written as if it was an essay. And as you know, when you're writing your essays, you have to have different words for the same concept, or the teacher will lower your grade and lower your grade and lower your grade. The more often you use that word, the less likely you are to get a passing grade on this essay. So we come up with these wonderful ways of saying immediately. So in the gospel, when you're reading, you'll come across words like, phrases like just when, at once, as soon as, when, quickly, just then, straight, right away, instantly, without delay. Each and every one of those words and phrases in Greek is the same word, euthus, or some form of Greek has these bizarre forms of words, but euthus, straight away, immediately, right now. In fact, it is so prevalent in the Gospel of Mark that there are 60 times that this word is used in the entire New Testament. 60 times. 41 of them are in the Gospel of Mark. 11 in the very first chapter. The Gospel of Mark is filled with urgency. So I'm going to use straight away because I like straight away as a statement. So straight away, Jesus came up out of the water. Straight away, the Spirit impelled him. Straight away, they left their nets. Straight away, he called them and they followed. Straight away on the Sabbath, he entered. Straight away, there was a man with an unclean spirit. Straight away, his fame spread. Straight away, they left the synagogue. Straight away, they told him about her. Straight away, the leprosy left him. And after sternly warning him, straight away, he went and told everybody. Over and over and over again. Just I said a couple of weeks ago, it reminds me of the I Am a Dream speech, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Over and over, I have a dream, I have a dream, I have a dream. How awful that speech would have been. I have a notion, I have a thought, I have an idea. I wonder if this would work. No, that's just constant preaching to bring out the urgency of what God is doing. In fact, if we go back to those first 3 verses again, verse 3, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make his paths straight. Now, in Greek, there's some wonderful things in here, but I'm just going to stay with make his paths straight. It literally says euthus his paths. Now that sounds completely strange, but they're drawing upon a quote from the prophet Isaiah, which wasn't written in Greek, it was written in Hebrew. And the Hebrew didn't really translate well to the Greek, but the author of the Gospel of Mark, the one who brought together this wonderful sermon, wanted to capture that particular prophecy from Isaiah's gospel, the work of Isaiah. And so he attached the word euthus straight away to the word that was actually in Hebrew. Now, the Hebrew word doesn't translate. It's just almost impossible to get that thing to translate. But I think I can draw it. Are you up for this? Here we go. Let me get something to draw with. That'll work. Let's assume that this is the path that existed at the time of Isaiah, this wandering of the people trying to find their way to God. Okay. Then the prophet Isaiah says, make his paths straight, but it doesn't translate well. Not even euthus seems to translate well, because what it means is literally this. Let's see if I can do it. It literally means to take this path and make it immediate. This winding path immediately becomes together. We're there. The kingdom of God is at hand right now, right here. Just this amazing word that Isaiah uses to say, oh, we're wandering away from God. We don't know if God is with us. Somewhere out there in the distance, God is waiting. God is with us. Emmanuel. Isaiah. Wonderful, wonderful. Kind of fun. Kind of fun. Okay, any thoughts, questions, comments that may have come up through that?
So it strikes me if the Gospel of Mark is aimed at Romans, are those Romans Jews or Gentiles?
Well, darn good question. Scholars disagree. That's what my New Testament professor used to say in school. He would, Ambrose Edens, I loved Ambrose. I was his teaching assistant. And he would talk about this scholar says this, and this scholar says this, and this scholar says this. And on this particular thing, you would say, scholars disagree. We know that there is a thriving Jewish community in Rome, having to do with just the reality of being subjects of Rome and the two diasporas that had happened prior to Rome conquering Israel, that part of the world. Already Jews were scattered. And there was a thriving Jewish community in Rome. So we don't know if the first Christians were primarily from that community, if they were that community and Greeks, as they would have been called, or are they people who were Christians already who moved toward Rome in those 30 years between Jesus' resurrection and the writing of and the burning of Rome in 64. Scholars disagree.
I ask because it strikes me both with the parallelism in the very first line in the beginning to Genesis, and then of course it is written in Isaiah the prophet. Both of those, of course, are Old Testament references, and therefore would seem to indicate that the audience was familiar with the Old Testament, and therefore perhaps Jews.
Very, very good argument for that particular thesis.
Not arguing. No, not arguing. I'm
No.
observing. In this day and age, I don't want to argue with anything.
If you were a scholar and you had the position that Mark is writing primarily to Jews, you just
this would be a case
out their case.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. And the scholars on the other side would say, well, still, if the community was truly Christian, it would also be drawing references from the Old Testament because Jesus was the fulfillment of that promise. He was the Messiah foretold by the Jews. Scholars disagree, but you laid out the case perfectly.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So the euthus, is that how you say it?
That's how I say it. That's the simple form.
Okay. What does that most closely translate to? Like, I know because they use all the different words, but like,
it literally means straight away, which is not a idiom we use anymore.
Yeah.
It would have been an idiom in the time of great schooner ships crossing the oceans. For us in modern English, immediately is as close as you're going to get.
And then my other question is, since this was like a sermon, was this Mark actually giving a sermon, or was it writing a sermon for distribution, like to be spoken?
My sensibility of it is that it begins as a sermon, or even a short series of sermons to Christians who are living in fear, because it just speaks to fear throughout, and ends with the word afraid. How it is written down, it clearly though was written down, because the writers of Matthew and Luke have a copy in hand when they are writing their gospels. My sensibility is it starts as a sermon, maybe notes, maybe written down, maybe spontaneous, I don't know, but soon after it's preached, it is written as text. Any other questions or thoughts? I love Mark, if you haven't figured that out. My favorite gospel, for me, it just captures who Jesus is and who I really believe Jesus can be for us in this moment in time. Well, the first reason I wanted to do the Gospel of Mark for this moment in time was that it's urgent. The second reason was that it has this sense that Jesus is a man of action. That actually was the first title for this series, was Jesus, Man of Action. But it just didn't quite work. Jesus proclaims the time is fulfilled, the kingdom of God is at hand, come near, repent, believe the good news. There is that urgency, but immediately after saying that, Jesus does something. He calls his disciples. Jesus teaches in the synagogue, then he casts out an unclean spirit. Jesus goes to the home of Simon and Andrew, begins to teach, and Jesus heals Simon's mother-in-law. Jesus shares a meal with the disciples. Then he heals the sick and casts out demons. From sunset well into the night, there is this rhythm within the Gospel of Mark between teach, act, heal, act, speak, act, tell a story, act, share a parable, acts, reveal something about the very nature of God, then act. The Jesus that the preacher of Mark brings to a people who are afraid is not just a storyteller and healer and wisdom sharer. He is someone who is actively involved in protecting them, in lifting them up, in giving them courage, in delivering them from the dogs in the arena. This Jesus is not passive. This Jesus is at work. And by the end of the gospel, what Mark is arguing is if we are going to teach about Jesus, we better do something about it too. It's not enough for us to tell the story. We must act in Jesus' name. We can speak his words with our mouths, but we must then become his hands and feet and work in the world. This rhythm of teach, act, teach, act, teach, act is another reason I think it's perfect for the moment we're in. We are in a moment, despite our isolation, where people are in real need. And sharing with them a gospel that in the sweet by and by, you will go to heaven and sit with him, with Jesus behind the pearly gates with the streets paved with gold. People in great need more than that. They need Jesus' followers to act in Jesus' name to make a difference. That's difficult in this moment in time, and yet it is our call. Doesn't mean we have to fix everything, but it does mean that we must do our part as we can to touch the life of someone who is in need and trust that God will enter into that act and do far more than we could ever imagine, like ripples in a pond. So it's urgent, it's active. That's why I chose it for this time. Thoughts, questions?
Dale, I can't help but think they were hiding away in the catacombs. We are sequestered in our homes and need a message of hope, but also how can we attain that hope? And so the good news and the call to action, I think it's very appropriate for this time.
Mhm. And it's to discover that hope and then to embody that hope. Without the embodiment, it's just not good news, at least not to me. It has to be out there, at work in the world, transforming people's lives. Well, there are two more considerations that I want us to take a look at in the time that we have left. I'm probably going to run a few minutes over the 1 hour mark, but I just love that review. I got a little over exuberant about it. But there are two more considerations I want us to look at. First, Mark's gospel proclaims who Jesus is, and at the same time proclaims who we are, who Jesus is and who we are as well. And if you have the Gospel of Mark, you can follow along. You have the text. If not, just listen. That works too. Do we have anyone who would like to read the text? It is 4 verses, Mark 1, 4 through 8. Would someone read for us?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Keith.
4 through 8. And so John came, baptizing in the desert region and preaching a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. The whole Judean countryside and the people of Jerusalem went out to him. Confessing their sins, they were baptized by him in the Jordan River. John wore clothing made of camel's hair and a leather belt around his waist, and he ate locusts and wild honey. And this was his message: after me will come one more powerful than I, the thongs of whose sandals I am not worthy to stoop down and untie. I baptize you with water, but he will baptize you with the Holy Spirit.
Isn't John wonderful? Building this anticipation, so radically different than everybody else. And he just wears his clothes that way. Look, I'm doing something different now. God is about to do something different now. Hey, look, you can't even help but look at me, because I am embodying that something new is about to happen. Just building this anticipation. And if someone would read for us, just following verses 9 through 11. Nancy, could you do that for us? You'll need to unmute.
I'm trying to get this a little into the light. We have a Halloween window, and so I can't turn this in this room. Okay. In those days, Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. And just as he was coming up out of the water, he saw the heavens torn apart and the Spirit descending like a dove on him. And a voice came from heaven: "You are my Son, the beloved. With you I am well pleased."
Aha. Okay. Jesus is baptized. The heavens open. The presence of God, described here as a dove coming down, is with Jesus, and a voice. Make sure I get this exactly right. A voice came from heaven: "You are my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased." God is declaring who Jesus is. Jesus is God's Son. Jesus is the beloved, the one from his heart. The words here are just so wonderful. The Son, the translation, the Greek is ho huios mu, which means the Son of me. Ho agapetos. Anybody recognize any word in the middle of ho agapetos? That word that that Greek word of a particular kind of love, not eros, that romantic love, not philios, that brotherly love, but something a little different. Anybody remember that, what it is? Agape from Vian, fantastic. What does agape mean? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? It means unconditional love. There's eros, which is romantic love, philios, which is brotherly love, and agape, which is this unconditional love. I unconditionally love you as if you are part of me, part of my heart. You are the beloved. And then in ho eudokesa is the next line. I am so bad at Greek speaking these days. In ho eudokesa, which we usually translate as with whom I am well pleased. That is a ridiculously uninspiring translation. I'm rather pleased with you. You're a nice guy. It's not what the Greek says. The Greek en ho eudokesa is in whom, in ho, and eudokesa literally means I delight. It's a little different. Not pleased. I delight in you. I am filled with joy by your very presence. And so I always translate this particular piece as you are my son, the beloved, in whom I delight, because I think it just captures the text so much better. Can you see that shift? See that shift? But it not only says who Jesus is, it also says who we are. It says, Jesus is my son. Jesus is the beloved. Jesus is the one in whom God delights. But Jesus calls his followers some particular names. Did anybody, not Peter, John, but he refers to them with some particular words, his followers, his disciples. Does anybody remember any of those? The one that strikes me at this moment in this text is that he refers to them as his family. You may remember that Jesus is teaching his disciples and there's a knock on the door and someone says, your mother and your brothers are here to see you. And Jesus looks at his disciples and says, who? These are my mother and my sisters and my brothers. Jesus claims us as family. Jesus claims us as sons and daughters of God. And those of us within who are baptized in the Christian movement, part of the symbolism of baptism is being reborn as this new child of God, not just a son or a daughter, but a beloved child, to literally be born from the heart of God. So in this one little text, Mark proclaims that Jesus is the Son of God, the beloved, in whom God delights, and you gathered here in the dark, afraid, you too are the sons and daughters of God. You are beloved of God. In you, God delights. Now there's a message. There's a message. I need that message. I had a rotten day, just a rotten day. And as I say that message, I'm just kind of like, okay, tomorrow's going to happen and I'm going to be okay with it because I know who I am. Thoughts, questions, ideas, wonderings? Well, there is one other text which I think captures another thing going on in this text. And well, let's do the whole section. Would someone read for us Mark chapter 1, verses 14 through 20? 14 through 20. Can I lean upon my sister in Fort Worth, Texas to read 14 through 20?
As soon as I pull it up, you can.
I love it. We all carry
Sorry.
our Bible with us now. She's pulling it up.
Okay. It is.
Chapter 1, verses 14 through 20.
You're going to have her skip verse 12 and 13.
Let me make sure I got this right before we do anything.
Okay.
I want to talk about it.
You want to talk about 12 through, we'll come back to it. Okay.
Mark chapter 1, verse 12.
I'm going to push us farther down the road.
Okay.
Just for the sake of time. This is the calling of Jesus' disciples. What's important about this particular section is that there's a rhythm to it. Jesus begins to proclaim the gospel, saying the time is fulfilled and the kingdom of God has come near. Euthus, repent and believe in the good news. He says something. So naturally, in the rhythm of the Gospel of Mark, he now has to do something. And what he does is he calls his first disciples. And the disciples he calls, the people he brings in to be the founders of the movement, to carry it forward, they're not scholars, they're not mystics, they're not community activists transforming the systems around them, they're fishermen. And along where Jesus is walking along the side of the Sea of Galilee, the most common person you're going to run into is a fisherman. They are anyone. They are everyone. They are us. It is totally cool. It's totally cool. So Laura, if you would go a little farther on, let's try verses 35 through 39. This is the beginning of the second day of Jesus' ministry. He was really busy. I mean, he proclaims, he calls his disciples, he teaches, he heals, he has dinner, he heals people from sunset all the way into the night. And then the beginning of the second day goes like this. 35 through 39.
In the morning, am I still on? Okay, yeah. In the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. And Simon and his companions hunted for him. When they found him, they said to him, "Everyone is searching for you." He answered, "Let us go on to the neighboring towns so that I may proclaim the message there also, for that is what I came to do." And he went throughout Galilee, proclaiming the message in their synagogues and casting out demons. You want me to continue?
Now, let's stop right there. Hang on to the spot.
Okay.
Hang on to the spot. I just love that Jesus begins his second day after this amazing first day by being alone with God in prayer. He's gone to a place that's so alone that people are searching for him and they can't find him. So the rhythm of the gospel is every now and then interrupted by a communing moment with God. And this one is just so beautiful. And then Jesus says, let's go out into the world and proclaim the message. And you can see the rhythm in verse 39. They went throughout Galilee, proclaiming and casting out demons, going into the synagogues to teach, casting out demons. There's this rhythm going back and forth. And in the midst of this rhythm, something happens that for me defines this gospel. In this text, the close of the very first chapter of the Gospel of Mark, I believe we learn the motivation behind everything Jesus says and does and was and is and ever will be. It's laid out for us in this text. Would you read for us 40 to the end, 40 through 45?
A leper came to him, begging him and kneeling. He said to him, "If you choose, you can make me clean." Moved with pity, Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, "I do choose. Be made clean." Immediately, the leprosy left him and he was made clean. After sternly warning him, he sent him away at once, saying to him, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priests, and offer for your cleansing what Moses commanded as a testimony to them." But he went out and began to proclaim it freely and to spread the word, so that Jesus could no longer go into a town openly, but stayed out in the country, and people came to him from every quarter.
Okay. Jesus encounters a leper, a man who has leprosy. I should say that more clearly. And to be with a man who has leprosy at all is a problem in the Jewish faith. There is the reality that there are people who are clean and unclean. The clean have access to the grace of God through the synagogue and the temple. People who are unclean have no access. And if you associate with those people, you too may lose your access. And if you touch one, you are banned from the temple. That's what's kind of in the backdrop here for Jesus encountering this man. It would have been so much smarter to just go by. In terms of making his ministry more in the towns, in the cities, Jesus surely knew that this was going to have consequences. And he probably knew the extra consequence that would come too, that this guy is not going to keep his mouth shut. The Euthus comes up twice. Jesus sends him away immediately, at once, Euthus. And the man does, let me say how's it said exactly in my text? But he went out, he Euthus, and began to proclaim it freely and spread the word. The consequence, Jesus touched a leper. He's no longer welcome in the towns, but must stay out in the country where the people go to him. His fame spreads, which draws people, but he's limited in his travel at this particular moment in his ministry. Why does he do this? It's there right in the text. Why does Jesus choose to heal him?
Because he had compassion on him.
Because he had compassion on him. Verse 41 begins with this actually a passionate line, moved from his depths, moved. And most translations say with pity. And the hassle is that when that word was originally translated into English, pity meant something different than it does now. Pity now has this pejorative sense that, you know, I'm up here, you're down there, you're pitiful. In the Greek, compassion is so much closer. The word is actually mercy, but mercy in this particular word can also mean compassion. So move with compassion. Jesus chooses to suffer the consequences of healing this man. And I believe everything Jesus says and does from this point on in the gospel goes back to this particular line. Jesus is moved with compassion. And if you watch carefully as we get to the feeding of the 5,000, as we go to particular points along the way, it'll say Jesus had compassion on the crowd. Thoughts, notions, ideas, questions.
I want to share that without meaning to disrupt our love for the compassion. My reference here with this new, I think it's a New Revised Standard Version.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little footnote.
Mm-hmm.
It right here, and so I wonder if your it's New Revised. I wonder if your Bible has this also, because right where it says pity, mine does say pity, but it has a little footnote that says other ancient authorities read anger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, isn't it amazing when we have these different, we all think that, oh, we just have one copy that everybody reads from the same original text. No, we have many different copies, ancient copies of this text. And the minority report is the word anger. Now, it's a completely different word than compassion. For me, its efficacy is that it connects so well with moved.
Mm-hmm.
Moved with compassion in our setting, the way we use the word compassion is kind of one of those, oh, sweetie, I'll pray for you. We use compassion in a way that often doesn't have an action connected to it.
Right.
We learn in the compassion practice. I said this a few weeks ago. Compassion is empathy, being moved from one's depths, and then responding in order to ease someone's suffering or promote their flourishing. It is both empathy, feeling from depths, and action. And pity is not even close to action. The way I use compassion, it certainly has action to it, but anger, I can kind of see that. He's just, why hasn't somebody helped this man? Why is he separated from the people of God because of a disease? How could we exclude him in this way? I could see anger because it kind of captures the backdrop and pushes toward action.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Compassion is to be, I'm connecting with what you mean when you say moved, that it's an emotion that has energy. Compassion is an emotion that has energy, and anger certainly is an emotion that has energy. We want to, so much of the time I feel like it's considered a like not positive, right? It's not positive. Anger is not positive, but of course it is. Anger is the energy that gets a lot of things done.
It does.
And not necessarily negative, the way you just worded that. It's action, it's protest, it's rebellion, it's revolt, it's change.
Our translation says indignant.
Yes.
Yeah, which then we Googled it just to confirm our understanding of the word, is anger at what is perceived as unfair treatment.
There's the Minority Report right there. You know, we do have these two words. They both have this sense of movement. I like what Shelley said about anger. Most everybody in this group knows that I struggle with some serious mental health issues. I'm bipolar 2, according to my doctors. I take medication, which drives me nuts. And that's why bipolar people get in so much trouble, because the medication drives them nuts and they quit taking it. But in the midst of my therapy a long time ago, I had a therapist help me understand that I was using the wrong emotion all the time. He said, "You're always angry at times when you should be sad. Sadness is energy for acceptance. Anger is energy for change." And he was talking to me because I was angry about things that I had absolutely no control over. He was encouraging me to grieve. This text doesn't encourage us to grieve over the suffering of others, but to use energy to act, energy for change. Other thoughts, questions? This is wonderful, wonderful.
Going back a little bit out of the rhythm piece, just on to 37, where Simon Peter says, "Everyone is looking for you." It struck me as we read through that what Peter is saying to him is, "Hey, everybody's looking for you. Everyone that saw you work yesterday is looking for you to see more of what you're doing." And what Jesus, his reply indicates what he's hearing is everyone throughout Israel is looking for you, the Messiah, to come. And so his response is not, well, it's not the response to Peter's saying, "Hey, everybody you saw yesterday wants to see you again." His response is, well, let's go see everyone and head out to the villages.
Remember, he called his disciples common people, anyone, everyone, even us. Let's go out there. Let's be, it's actually a wonderful, I preached a sermon on this once. Everyone is searching for you. That phrase, searching for you, is a wonderful phrase in the context of people looking for meaning and purpose and in their lives and value for themselves, to be able to see themselves as somehow worthy in any way, shape, or form, even lovable, seeking for that, searching for that. And Mark writes, everyone is searching for you. It's a great line. This chapter 1 is just like, it's just so cool. Well, we are at 7. Yeah, Teresa, go.
I was going to say one more thing. And right after that, in my version, Jesus says, "That is why I have come." And, you know, I'm thinking that's why he came to that area, but I suppose it could be why he's, you know, why he has come to be
Mhm.
Jesus.
It's why he has come, to proclaim, to do it with authority. And that authority is drawn from, his acting on it.
Mhm.
Now I'm recognizing at 7:38, we're going to try to stay to an hour. And if you need to sign off, very cool. We're going to be back together at 6:30 next Thursday, and we'll move on into Mark's gospel. I actually haven't considered exactly how far we're going to move. There's no way to cover it in the time frame that we've set aside, but we are together through, I think, November 19th. No, that's not right. The Thursday, November 19th, the Thursday before Thanksgiving. If we get to that Thursday and we decide we want to keep going, we'll keep going in December. But we certainly will take a pause for Thanksgiving. As much fun as I have doing this, you'd probably rather eat some food, be with family.
In our sequestered catacombs.
In your sequestered catacombs.
Yes, I love that idea somebody shared.
Yeah,
Yes.
Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you for
Mhm.
that.
We
Being all
are.
sequestered here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So if you need to sign off, that's great. I promised Shelley I would go back to verses 12 and 13.
Yes, who wants to talk about Satan with me?
So if you want to stay around and hang out for 12 and 13, you're welcome to, but I also recognize the covenant and feel free, don't feel bad at all if you need to sign off and
we got
be with children, whatever.
I said we got to do bedtime. We got to go.
Yep.
Good to see you guys.
Good
Good
to see you, Dallas.
Good night.
Right.
Good night.
I've got a quick question that you may
Sure.
not want to address. But is there one translation? I was just looking at Brad's translation. Brad and I looked at our two translations on our phones instead of on paper, where I could have gotten it faster for you. But they are so different. Is there one translation that would serve our purpose on Mark that's better than others? Closer to the original thought, do you think? Or do you not want to,
the truth is I don't really know.
Okay.
I have yet to run into a translation that captures the urgency of Mark.
Okay.
The New Revised Standard claims to be the closest translation to the actual Greek.
Okay.
But just within the first chapter of Mark, there's so many words that they've chosen the word that was used in the King James because it's close enough. And people are used to saying it that way, so we'll just keep that word since it's close enough. There may be a translation out there that Frank wrote, Frank Runyon. I've tried to contact him a little while back because I wanted to see if the video of his play that Temple saw in a class that he was taking was available for purchase or view or whatever, but I haven't been able to get Frank Runyon Productions to get back to me. It is COVID world. But I wonder, in his writing his thesis, did he translate the gospel? I'd be interesting to see it, but I don't know the answer to the question. I don't know.
Okay. There
is a version I kind of like these days, Common English version. It's not good news for modern man, kind of that thing that happened back in the 70s. But excuse me, my computer decided it wanted to do an automatic update. Okay. canceled. I didn't need my computer to restart in the middle of a conversation. But I think it's Common English. I'll look at that up to make sure, but it's just so matter of fact English that I kind of like it. It doesn't spend a lot of time trying to deal with the grammar of the Greek, and the grammar of the Greek is a pain. It just says it. So Shelley, 12 and 13, what questions do you have about that?
Yeah, I'm curious because, well, I was going to ask what Mark means when Mark says, tempted by Satan. You know, some other gospels play these two verses out into a big scene,
Now,
big
Mark's
drama.
in too much of a hurry.
Yeah, Mark just says it in 2 verses. The Spirit immediately drove him out to the wilderness, and he was in the wilderness for 40 days, tempted by Satan, and he was with the wild beasts, and the angels waited on him. But I just wonder
Come on, get on with
it. What your knowledge, what your studies reveal about Mark's mention of Satan here.
I can say that most of the time, I'm looking at the Greek right now, most of the time, the Greek is the word tempter.
Tempter.
And it's not a proper noun, as if a name.
But it's a person. It's got the person. When we say tempter, we add the er. We know that changes a verb into a person, like paint becomes painter. You know, a walk becomes walker. That's how we change a verb into a person doing that thing. Mm-hmm. So if it's tempter, it's got some sort of
For
personhood.
the first time ever, I know where the word Satan comes from. I'm so glad you asked this question. I've never looked for it. The Greek is the word Satana.
Aha.
It literally means adversary.
There we go. Yeah, we hear it.
But it's not a proper noun. It's not a name.
We capitalize it for fun.
Yeah, the capital S is all about tradition.
There we go.
Not about the text. But the notion that Jesus has adversaries is a wonderful thing to think about and what that might really mean, both in kind of the people plane and in the spiritual plane.
Or the external and the internal.
Yes, yes. There's a thought.
Mm-hmm.
We all have enough temptation that lives within us.
Or adversary, the one that argues with us, right? That voice inside that says, you shouldn't do this. You should do that.
Now, Nancy, I kind of can relate to
Okay, Nancy, with your IFS, a little IFS.
I have it now. No, I'm kidding, but I honestly wondered if that meant inward, you know, temptation in terms of your own thinking, you know.
Well, it says, isn't he by himself?
Yes.
The Spirit immediately drove him out into the wilderness. He was in the wilderness 40 days, tempted by little s Satan, and he was with the wild beasts. So he's not alone. Sorry, the wild beasts are there, and the angels waited on him. He's got angels there.
Yeah, let's see what angels is.
But Laura, that could be the first time any reference to parts is found anywhere.
Now, this is also where the word angel comes from. Love that. The word literally means messenger, but it's ageloi, found to be where angel comes from. It's a Greek word. There's a lot to play with that in terms of if we take it as an inward struggle, even you're not up for this. What makes you think that you have the ability to bring this message to people who probably don't want to hear it, and the authorities are going to hate you about it? What makes you think you're not worthy? And then there's another voice saying, you are the beloved, you are the Son of God, and God delights in you. God doesn't really delight in you. You're a patsy for this whole thing. You have a sense of how it's going to really turn out. This isn't going to be good at the end. Are you really able to do, that's an interesting. I've dealt with that you're not worthy voice.
Oh, well, nobody else has. Just you and Jesus.
We have so much in common. I cut my hair a little bit though last week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, that was interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's fun. The Bible is so rich, and I wish I read Greek well. There was a point in time in seminary where I could read Greek. I can't do it now. I do know how to research words, and I know how the grammar works. But I can't read it. I wish I could read it in Greek. I got a sense that if I could read it in Greek, it would just come alive. But we speak English, which
I'll just throw in that Frank Runyon played a character on As the World Turns named Steve Andropoulos, and he was Greek. He was Greek.
And Andropoulos literally means people lover.
Anybody else watch As the World Turns, or was that just me? No.
Shelley made me as we were all done. We're dating. She makes me go up to the common room at the dorm, Jarvis, watch As the World Turns.
I remember a little bit of it, not always watching it faithfully, but definitely him. And I remember when you went to that and you're talking about how excited you were to see him.
Oh, it was unbelievable. I was like, oh my God. They had written him out of the story of As the World Turns. He'd been sent off to prison. And in fact, he went to seminary. The actor himself left the show to go to seminary.
That's a thought.
But his
Patrick,
character was sent to
Nancy,
prison.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Seminary.
That I didn't know that he'd gone to seminary till I met him at this event and saw his play, and we talked with him, and he said, actually, I went to seminary.
Yeah.
Didn't you take him a rose too?
No,
that was Brian Boitano.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Also in love with Brian Boitano, yes.
Yeah. No, we brought Steve to Central Christian Church in Lebanon to do his show. We also brought him to Torrey Pines Christian Church in La Jolla.
That's where I saw him.
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah, quite moving.
Yeah.
He was really good.
It's a great play. It's a great play. Passionate. Patrick, God bless you.
Glad to see you here tonight, Patrick.
Thank you. You too. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to invite us to sign off, gather again next Thursday. Sunday morning, for those who are available, we are going to be looking at facing fear. There's no fear in our world right now, and nobody's trying to make us afraid in the election cycle. So we're going to be talking about facing fear, being liberated from fear, navigating fear, a lot of different ways to work with it, but talk about a prison. So we're going to look at Jesus as one who liberates us from fear.
Great.
It's really good to see all of you, and I enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next Thursday.
Great to see
And-
you,
and-
Laura.
Okay,
Good to see you too,
bye.
Brad.
Y'all have a
Bye.
good week. Good seeing everybody.
Love you, brother.
night.
Good to see
You too, brother. Take care of yourself out there.
Okay. Now it's 10
Okay.
o'clock for them.
Goodbye.
There we go.